A young nurse lost her job after saving life of an injured hiker. Next day, 2 helicopters hovered outside her home. The day started off calm and gentle in the countryside of Texas. The air was crisp, and the sun peeked lazily over the distant hills, bathing the town in soft morning light. Diana, a young nurse, sat behind the front desk of the local clinic, finishing her notes and preparing for the end of her shift. The clinic, with its pale green walls and sterile smell, had a strict policy. All treatments had to be paid for up front. This meant that every patient who walked in, no matter how urgent their condition, needed to settle the bill before receiving care. Diana didn't agree with the policy, but she had little say in the matter. She'd grown up here, in this small town, where everyone knew everyone else. She'd always wanted to help people, to be the kind of nurse who made a difference in the lives of those who needed it most. But working here, in this place where money often determined life and death, left her torn between compassion and the cold, hard reality of the healthcare system. The receptionist, Gloria, was already eyeing the clock, ready to hand over the reins to Diana. Just as Diana was about to walk into the back room to change for the end of her shift, the door to the clinic swung open. A gust of wind accompanied a figure, a man, ragged and disheveled, barely conscious, stumbling inside. His clothes were torn, his face smeared with dirt, and blood soaked through his shirt, staining the fabric dark. His eyes, wild and panicked, met hers for a brief second before he collapsed, barely staying upright as he crumpled into a chair near the reception desk. Gloria, who had been on the phone, snapped her attention to the man, her expression shifting immediately from mild annoyance to one of concern. She hesitated for a moment, but then the reality of the situation hit her. "Sir, you need to pay up front for any treatment," Gloria said, her voice stiff and cold, an automatic response. Diana's heart skipped a beat as she rushed to the man's side, her training kicking in. She noticed his shallow breathing and the blood seeping from his leg, leaving a dark stain on the floor beneath him. His eyes were glazed over, and he was clearly in no condition to make decisions. The sight of him, his face pale and covered in sweat, struck something deep inside her. She didn't need to ask for his permission, nor did she care about the clinic's policies. This man needed help, and she wasn't going to turn him away. Ignoring the protest in the air, Diana quickly helped him to the back room. Gloria stood there, frozen for a moment, before shaking her head and muttering something about the rules. Diana didn't care. The rules didn't matter when someone's life was on the line. In the back room, Diana worked quickly and efficiently, moving through the familiar motions she'd perfected over the years. She took his pulse, assessing his condition. The man's leg was badly injured, the gash deep, and it was clear that he had been walking for a while before collapsing. There were signs of dehydration, and he was running a fever. Diana's fingers moved deftly as she cleaned the wound, her focus sharpening as she worked. She glanced at his face, noticing the grime and exhaustion etched into his features. His eyes were barely open, and his breathing was labored. She knew time was of the essence. She couldn't let him slip away. She stitched the wound, using every bit of care and expertise she had, and kept him stabilized as best as she could, all while the clinic outside continued on as though nothing unusual was happening. No one came to check on her. No one asked how the man was doing. They were too busy dealing with the next patient in line, the next bill to be processed. The hours passed slowly, and Diana stayed by his side, checking his vitals, adjusting the 4 fluids, and keeping him comfortable. Her shift had long ended, but she didn't leave him. It wasn't just the professionalism in her that kept her there. It was something deeper, something in her heart that told her she couldn't walk away. In the quiet of the clinic, as the night grew darker, Diana found herself questioning the world she lived in. How could a system like this exist? A system that prioritized payment over humanity? How could people be expected to pay when they had nothing left? She'd seen it time and time again. People coming into the clinic too late because they couldn't afford the care they needed, only to leave with their health deteriorating further. And here she was, giving care to a stranger, without asking for a dime in return. The man, still unconscious, seemed to breathe a little easier as the night wore on. Diana stayed by his side, knowing she couldn't leave until she was certain he would be okay. Her hands were tired, her back sore from the long hours, but she didn't mind. This was what she was meant to do, help, no matter the cost. But in the morning, when the clinic manager came in, the reality of the situation hit. The man, still unconscious but stable, was lying on the bed in the back room. Diana had already done everything she could, and she felt a small sense of relief knowing that he was out of immediate danger. That's when the manager came in, looking at the scene with a raised eyebrow. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, crossing his arms. Diana, who was sitting in the corner, rubbing her eyes, met his gaze. There was no hiding the fact that she had broken the clinic's strict policy. The manager wasn't interested in the details. All he saw was a breach in protocol, a violation that couldn't be overlooked. "Diana," he said, his tone sharp and businesslike, "we can't keep treating people without payment. This isn't a charity." Diana felt a pang in her chest. She knew what was coming, but she had never imagined it would happen like this. She never thought her act of compassion would cost her everything. "You're fired," the manager said coldly. "We have a policy, and it's clear you don't understand the importance of that. We'll have to let you go." Her heart sank. She stood there for a moment, stunned, before the weight of it all hit her. She had just lost her job. For helping someone. For doing what she believed was right. The words echoed in her mind, and she felt a mix of anger and sadness rise within her. Was it really worth it? Had she made a mistake? Diana didn't argue. She gathered her things and walked out of the clinic, leaving behind the walls that had once been her place of purpose. Outside, the morning sun greeted her, but it felt hollow. The world seemed to move on, indifferent to her actions, to the price she had just paid for doing something that should have been second nature. As Diana walked through the town, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Not just for her, but for the world she lived in. She had made a choice, one that had cost her everything she knew. But as she walked away from the clinic, she held on to something deeper than just a job. She held on to the knowledge that sometimes, doing the right thing was its own reward. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over Diana's small cottage. Nestled on the edge of a quiet mountain town, her home was a peaceful refuge, far removed from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But today, peace felt fleeting, like a distant memory. Diana sat on her porch, staring into the horizon, lost in thought. The events of the past 24 hours replayed in her mind. She could still hear the manager's cold words echoing in her head, his dismissal sharper than any cut. "This isn't a charity." He'd said it as though she had committed some unspeakable crime by choosing compassion over policy. Her heart ached with the weight of it all. Was it wrong to help someone in need? Was it foolish to sacrifice her job, her future, for the sake of a stranger? She looked down at her hands, still stained with the memory of the man's blood, and wondered if her choice had been a mistake. Her fingers tightened around the railing as she struggled with the growing sense of regret. She had stood by her values, but what did it matter now? She was unemployed, with no clear path forward. Her sense of purpose seemed to have evaporated, leaving behind only uncertainty. As Diana sat there, her thoughts heavy, a strange vibration in the ground interrupted her reverie. The rumble was deep, almost like a distant thunderstorm, but it grew louder and more intense by the second. She blinked, confused, and looked around, her eyes searching the quiet surroundings for any sign of what was happening. And then, out of nowhere, she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold, the unmistakable roar of helicopter blades slicing through the air. Her heart raced as she stood up and looked towards the horizon. The sound grew louder, closer, and soon she could see two massive helicopters descending from the sky, their rotors churning up the air with deafening force. The noise was overwhelming, the powerful hum reverberating through her chest as the helicopters dipped lower, their shadows stretching across the fields surrounding her cottage. Diana's breath caught in her throat. Who would be arriving in helicopters out here, in the middle of nowhere? The suddenness of the moment, the intrusion of such power into her peaceful life, left her frozen for a moment. Her mind raced with questions. Was there an emergency? A high-profile visitor? The helicopters landed with a force that sent a cloud of dust and debris swirling around them. Diana instinctively covered her face with her arm to shield herself from the chaos. As the blade slowed, the air became still again, but the mystery remained. The sound of boots crunching against gravel broke the silence, and Diana turned, her gaze drawn to the figures emerging from the helicopters. There were several men, at least 5 or 6, dressed in dark suits, their movements sharp and coordinated. Their faces were serious, their expressions unreadable. They walked with purpose, a sense of authority in every step. Diana watched them approach, her mind spinning with confusion and curiosity. Who were they? Why had they come? But it wasn't until the last man stepped forward that her confusion turned to disbelief. The man she had helped, the one who had stumbled into the clinic just the day before, was standing there, surrounded by a group of suited men, now impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. His once rugged appearance had been replaced with a clean, sharp image, his hair styled neatly, and his features illuminated by the late afternoon sun. He looked every bit the part of someone important, powerful, influential, and undeniably wealthy. Louis Marchand. Diana's pulse quickened as the realization hit her. The man she had saved, the one who had wandered into her clinic injured and desperate, was not just some ordinary hiker. He wasn't a random stranger. He was someone with a presence that commanded attention, someone whose name was synonymous with wealth, power, and influence. She had no idea. Louis stopped a few paces from her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Diana stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat, trying to make sense of the surreal moment unfolding before her. Her heart pounded in her chest, and 1,000 thoughts rushed through her mind, each more bewildering than the last. Finally, Louis stepped forward, his eyes locking with hers. His gaze was calm, but there was a depth to it, an understanding of the moment. It was as though he had been waiting for this confrontation for a long time. He gave a small, almost imperceptible smile as he spoke. "Diana," he said, his voice smooth and controlled. "I owe you my life." The words hung in the air, thick with significance. Diana blinked, still processing everything that had just happened. Her voice felt stuck in her throat, unable to form the questions that burned in her mind. She glanced at the suited men standing a few feet behind him, their expressions unreadable. They were waiting for something, but Diana couldn't quite understand what. She stammered, struggling to find her voice. "I don't understand. You're Louis Marchand?" Louis nodded, his demeanor calm and reassuring. "Yes, I am," he said. "And I'm the man you saved yesterday." Diana's head swam with the enormity of the situation. She had treated him like any other patient, no questions asked, no expectations in return. But now, standing before her, he was not just any patient. He was a man of incredible wealth and influence. And his gratitude, as genuine as it seemed, left her feeling small and insignificant in comparison. I never knew who you were," Diana said softly, still trying to absorb the shock. "I just helped you because you needed it. That's all." Louis nodded again, his expression unwavering. "And that's why I'm here," he said. "To thank you, of course, but also to offer you something in return." Diana felt her stomach tighten. The very idea that someone like him could offer her anything seemed impossible. What could a man like Louis Marchand possibly have to offer someone like her? She had nothing to give him but her time and care. But her curiosity and the mounting sense of awe kept her rooted to the spot. Louis continued, his tone more sincere now. "I was on a retreat in the mountains when I got into an accident. I've been hiking alone for days, trying to clear my head, when I stumbled and fell. It was a long walk to your clinic, but I didn't have the strength to make it any further. When I arrived, I was in no condition to ask for help, but you didn't hesitate. You saved me when no one else would have." Diana's head spun with the enormity of the situation. Louis had been near death when he stumbled into her clinic. But what Diana didn't know was that, even before he had arrived at the clinic, Louis had made arrangements. After recovering from his injuries, he had been desperate to find out who had shown him such compassion. With his resources, he had tracked down the clinic's records, discreetly obtaining her name, and, from there, managed to trace her back to her cottage. The sophisticated network he had at his disposal was able to dig into public records and local contacts, piecing together her identity and location with precision. Diana began, now fully understanding. "How did you find me?" Louis smiled, an expression tinged with appreciation. "I have the means to find people, Diana. When you saved me, I knew I had to do something to repay that kindness. And I knew I couldn't wait for you to come to me. I had to come to you." He paused, his tone softening. "I didn't just want to say thank you. I want to offer you an opportunity, a chance to do more, something that would allow you to help others, the way you helped me." Diana's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, taking in the reality of the moment. 2 helicopters, men in suits, a billionaire standing before her, all converging on her humble cottage. She had always dreamed of changing the healthcare system, of providing care to those who needed it without the interference of money or bureaucracy. But she never imagined it would happen like this. Louis stepped closer, his presence commanding but gentle. "Let me help you build that clinic. Together, we can create a place where people can receive the care they deserve, no strings attached. A place where you can lead and heal with nothing holding you back. Diana stood frozen, her heart racing, her mind reeling. Was this real? Was she really being offered the chance of a lifetime by the man she had helped? A man whose world was so far removed from hers. She blinked, struggling to find the right words. The days following Lewis's visit were a blur for Diana. The helicopters, the men in suits, and the promise of a new life. All of it felt like something out of a dream. But as the dust settled and the excitement wore off, the reality of the decision ahead loomed large. Diana spent hours sitting alone on her porch, gazing out at the mountains that had always been her refuge. She had lived a simple life, one shaped by routine, the quiet rhythm of the clinic, and the familiar faces of the townspeople. It was a life that, despite its challenges, had brought her peace. But now, everything was about to change. Lewis's offer hung in the air, impossible to ignore. He had promised her the resources, the support, and the opportunity to create a clinic that would provide care to those in need, no matter their background or financial status. It was a dream come true for someone like Diana, someone who had spent her entire career working within a system that often felt more like a business than a place of healing. This was her chance to create something different, a place where compassion was the driving force, not profit. But as exciting as the prospect was, it also terrified her. Diana knew what it meant to be responsible for people's lives. The weight of managing a clinic, of overseeing everything from medical care to finances, felt overwhelming. She wasn't a businesswoman. She was a nurse, a healer. Could she really step into this new role? Could she balance her passion for care with the cold, hard reality of running an enterprise? The thought of leaving her quiet town, her home, and the life she had known for so long was equally daunting. What if she failed? What if she lost herself in the process? To help her make sense of it all, Diana reached out to the people who knew her best, her friends and family. She called her mother, who had always been her rock, and her best friend, Lucy, who had been her confidant since childhood. She needed their advice, their wisdom, and their encouragement. They were the ones who had seen her grow, who knew her heart, and who could offer the perspective she needed to make the right choice. Her mother, ever practical, had listened carefully before speaking. Diana, you've always wanted to make a difference. You've always cared for others, even when it meant sacrificing yourself. This is your chance to do more. You've been given an opportunity most people can only dream of. Don't let fear hold you back. You can do this. Lucy, on the other hand, had a more cautious approach. I know this is a huge decision, Dee, but you've got to ask yourself, what's your dream? You've always talked about creating a place where people are treated with respect and kindness, no matter who they are or where they come from. This is that chance. Don't let it slip through your fingers. But remember, it won't be easy. You'll have to fight for what you believe in every single day. Are you ready for that? Their words echoed in Diana's mind as she sat alone in her cottage, the quiet of the night wrapping around her like a blanket. The stars twinkled above, but there was a heaviness in her chest. She had always lived by a simple rule: follow your heart. And right now, her heart was telling her that this was her moment, the moment she had been waiting for her entire life. She could no longer stay on the sidelines, watching others try to change a broken system. She had the power, the opportunity, and the resources to make a real difference. The next morning, Diana stood in front of her small kitchen table, the contract Lewis had sent her lying before her. It was simple, straightforward, and yet, in that moment, it felt like the most significant decision she would ever make. She had never imagined herself in a position like this, signing a contract to build a clinic, to lead a team, to become the person in charge of something so important. It felt surreal. But as she stared at the paper, she realized something. She wasn't just signing her name. She was signing away the life she had known in exchange for a future that could change everything. Her hand hovered over the pen, hesitation gripping her for just a moment longer. Could she really do this? Could she live up to the expectations, not just of Lewis, but of the people who would depend on her clinic? Could she keep her compassion intact while learning to navigate the complexities of business? As if in answer, Diana's mind flashed to the faces of the patients she had treated in the small clinic. The children, the elderly, the families who couldn't afford the care they needed. She remembered the exhaustion in their eyes, the frustration of being turned away because they didn't have the money to pay up front. She thought about the many times she had felt helpless, bound by the rules of a system that cared more about profit than people. This was her chance to change all of that. This was her chance to create something better. And it was a chance she couldn't let slip away. With a deep breath, Diana took the pen in her hand and signed the contract. As the ink dried on the page, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. She was stepping into a new life, one that was as uncertain as it was exciting. She was no longer just a small-town nurse. She was about to become the heart and soul of a clinic that could transform lives. Within hours of signing the contract, Lewis's team sprang into action. The plan was set in motion. Diana's life, once defined by quiet days at the clinic and solitary moments in her cottage, was now tangled in the fast-paced, high-stakes world of business and philanthropy. She had meetings with architects, business strategists, and medical professionals, each one eager to help her bring her vision to life. It was a whirlwind, one she had not expected, but one she was quickly becoming accustomed to. In the beginning, it was overwhelming. Diana was used to working hands-on with patients, providing the care they needed without worrying about finances, regulations, or logistics. But now, she had to learn how to balance her passion for helping others with the reality of running a successful enterprise. There were endless decisions to be made. What kind of equipment would they need? How would they recruit doctors and nurses? How would they ensure that their services remained accessible to everyone, no matter their financial situation? It was a steep learning curve, but Diana embraced it. She had always been a quick learner, and now, more than ever, she needed to be. Lewis's team provided her with all the support she could need, but it was clear that the vision had to come from her. She was the one who would set the tone, who would define the values of the clinic, and who would make the final decisions. It was a heavy responsibility, but Diana felt ready. She wasn't just building a business, she was building a legacy, a place where people could receive the care they deserved, regardless of their income or status. As the days turned into weeks, Diana found herself slowly adjusting to her new role. She had to make difficult decisions, face setbacks, and deal with the realities of running a large-scale operation. But there were moments, small, quiet moments, when Diana would pause and take a deep breath. And in those moments, she would remember why she was doing this. She was here to create something better, something that would outlast her, something that would change the lives of those who needed it most. And in that knowledge, Diana found strength. She had taken a leap of faith, and now she was learning how to soar. After Diana stood at the entrance of her clinic, watching the soft morning light spill across the front lawn. The parking lot was already full, a steady stream of patients and staff moving in and out, each carrying the quiet hum of purpose. It had been months since she had signed the contract, months since she had taken that fateful leap of faith, and now, as she looked around at the bustling facility, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was her dream come true. This was the place she had always wanted to create, where patients were treated with dignity, where healthcare was about more than just profit, and where compassion was as important as medical expertise. The clinic had started small, just a few rooms, a handful of staff, but with Lewis's help, it had grown rapidly. What began as a humble initiative was now a thriving healthcare facility, one that provided care for people from all walks of life. People who had once been turned away because they couldn't afford treatment, people who had nowhere else to turn, now came here knowing they would receive the help they needed, no questions asked. As Diana walked through the clinic's halls, she couldn't help but smile. She greeted the nurses, the doctors, and the receptionists, each of them giving her a warm nod or a friendly wave. They all had the same mission: to heal, to care, to make a difference. Diana had worked in hospitals and clinics before, but never had she felt so connected to the people around her. It wasn't just about treating ailments anymore. It was about creating a space where people felt safe, heard, and valued. The atmosphere was one of calm efficiency. The staff worked seamlessly together, a well-oiled machine, but there was no sense of hurry or impatience. Diana had built a culture here that encouraged empathy, collaboration, and respect. No matter how busy the clinic got, there was always time to sit with a patient, to listen, to offer a kind word. Diana had set the tone from the very beginning. This clinic was not about numbers, it was about people. As she made her way down the hallway, she caught sight of a familiar face: Lewis. He was standing outside one of the patient rooms, chatting with a nurse, his sharp suit and confident demeanor a stark contrast to the scrubs and white coats around him. Diana couldn't help but smile as she approached him. He had been a constant presence in her life since that fateful day when he had arrived at her cottage, a stranger with a hidden identity. Over the months, their professional relationship had blossomed into a strong partnership. Lewis had given her the resources, but Diana had turned those resources into something real, something meaningful. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, and Diana had come to admire Lewis not just for his wealth, but for his vision and his commitment to helping others. Diana, Lewis greeted her with a warm smile. I just wanted to check in. I've been hearing nothing but good things about the clinic. How are things going? Diana paused for a moment, taking in the scene around her. The clinic was running smoothly, the patients were being treated with care, and the staff seemed more like a family than a group of co-workers. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. It's going great, she said, her voice filled with pride. Better than I ever imagined. The staff is amazing, and we're really making a difference. I've never felt more fulfilled. Lewis nodded, clearly pleased. I knew you were the right person for this. You've created something extraordinary here, Diana. Something that will last. Her heart swelled with gratitude. The path she had taken hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. She had started out as a small-town nurse, uncertain of her place in the world, unsure of her ability to make a difference. But now, she stood at the head of a thriving healthcare initiative, a leader in a movement that put people before profit. She had created a legacy. As they walked together through the clinic, Diana reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the days when she had worked in that small, overburdened clinic, struggling to help patients with limited resources. She remembered the feeling of helplessness when she couldn't provide the care that people needed because of financial constraints. She had always believed that healthcare should be a right, not a privilege, and now she had the resources to make that belief a reality. She had fought for it, and now she was seeing the fruits of her labor. But even as the clinic flourished, Diana never lost sight of what had brought her here. She had built this place on a foundation of compassion, and no amount of success or wealth could ever change that. Every patient, every smile, every moment of healing reminded her of why she had taken this leap in the first place. It wasn't for the accolades or the recognition, it was for the people. It was for the families who could now receive care without fear of bankruptcy, for the children who could see a doctor without being turned away, for the elderly who could receive the treatment they needed without judgment. Lewis, sensing her quiet reflection, spoke up again. You know, Diana, I've seen a lot of people come and go in this world. But what you've done here, it's rare. You've stayed true to who you are, to your values, even as the world around you changed. That's something to be proud of. Diana smiled, grateful for his words. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, looking at him. You gave me the chance, but it's the people here who made it work. It's a team effort. We're all in this together. As they continued to walk through the clinic, Diana felt a sense of peace settle over her. She was no longer the young, unsure nurse she had once been. She had grown into her role, into this new life, and now she was making a real impact. But most importantly, she had stayed true to herself. The journey had been difficult, yes, but it had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. At the end of the hallway, she stopped and turned to face Lewis. I've been thinking a lot about everything, she said quietly, about where I started and where I am now. And I've realized something. I may be managing this clinic, but the heart of it, this place, these people, is what makes it special. It's not the money or the power. It's the compassion we bring to the table every day. Lewis smiled, nodding in agreement. Exactly. And that's why I knew you were the right person for this. You're not in it for the money, Diana. You're in it for the people. Diana looked around one last time, her heart full. She had taken a leap of faith, and now she was watching it pay off. The future was still uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, she was ready. She had found her purpose, and she was going to make sure that this clinic, this dream, would continue to grow and change lives for years to come. And as she smiled at the staff, at the patients, at the family she had built, she knew that she had created something far more important than a business. She had created a legacy of hope,